Mikkel BJØRN.
Yes.
You're a member of Danish Parliament.
Yes.
For which party?
For the Danish People's Party.
You have. What would be your main agenda, political, for the whole party?
Oh, immigration and culture.
So, but you're against immigration?
Yes. Overall.
Yes.
Some kind of immigration, at least.
People we need, we don't. We need.
Yes, the people who commit crimes and so on, we don't want them to come.
But we're here to see the portraits of former Prime Ministers. But tell me again, how do you get your portrait?
Well, when you have been Prime Minister in Denmark and when you've committed to not ever going for the Prime Minister position.
You promise you'll never do it again.
You promise you'll never do it again.
But what
you'll have your portrait up on the wall here.
But what if your portrait is on the wall and you become the Prime Minister again, then it will be taken down, or you get a fine, or what?
No, you wouldn't get a fine. I don't know. It would probably be looked upon as ill-intended, but I don't think they would take the portrait down. But I don't know quite for sure. But it's a formality.
As far as I remember, we only have one female portrait.
That's also the position where the latest Prime Minister is positioned. So when Mette Frederiksen is no longer the Prime Minister, she will be the one to take this position.
Then that would be a place you would avoid.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Helle Thorning-SCHMIDT is that she actually, she's painted on this wall, on the image, yes, exactly. So even when she's moved, she will still be on this wall.
Wow.
So. This is a piece of very contemporary art, and but it's interesting that she's chosen to refer back to legacy of the past, because the two marble statues here, which have a kind of gravitas to them, because there's a sort of nod to the idea of academy in the kind of in the ancient Greek style, by the style of these statues. And although it's a contemporary portrait, she's in contemporary dress. She has, her hair is very contemporary. These two statues are in a position, and as we've heard earlier from our Member of Parliament,
but tell me,
there's like an amusing twist, because when this portrait is moved, she will still appear to be in the same position, which is kind of cheeky. It's interesting, her body language. That's quite a defensive.
What does that defensive?
Yeah. When you fold
decisive?
When you fold your arms in this way, it's kind of a defensive posture. But again, that's a very cultural specific thing, because it might not be.
But here you could mean I made up my mind and I stand with it.
So there we go. So there we have the cultural difference, as you'd say in French, in that this might be a decisive action.
Let's have a political.
Showing strength.
Yes. As a member of Parliament, what do you like this portrait?
No, it's very dull and.
But you would say the same about the person as a politician.
Yeah, probably. So it probably has something to do with that as well. But but no, I don't like it quite. It misses colors, and I think it misses personality. I think it's very dull. Yeah.
Okay.
It would be great to see your favourite portrait, because you must have one, because I understand your party's representative on culture, as you explained. So do you have a favourite one that you could walk us around?
Well, I'm very traditional, so it would probably be something like this one, if I had to.
Okay, and which one? This one? This man here?
Because of the character or because of the painting?
Well, I think he looks very powerful, and he looks interesting.
But you know who it is?
Yes, of course, it's SCAVENIUS.
And he was very powerful.
He was politically on the directly opposite side of me, but I like his portrait a lot.
But you know who was very powerful during the Second World War? He was the foreign minister?
Yes, he was, yes. And he was a terrible foreign minister, by the way.
Not if you agreed with his politics.
No, but I don't.
But the Parliament at that time did, actually.
Yes, some did.
Otherwise he'd be sacked.
Yeah,
that's something we tend to forget.
Yes, that's right.
So
well, I'm interested as the representative of culture for your party that you've chosen a portrait that's diametrically opposite in politics, but you like the stance, his body posture.
Well, it's probably
because it's classic, because how he sits in the chair.
I like this one as well, but it's probably just because it was painted during a period where this was the way you got painted, and I like this way more.
If you were to have a portrait done of yourself, which style would you choose? Would you favour this style as opposed
definitely. This style, or maybe this style. I like these a lot.
But so far, your party has never had a prime minister.
No, and we
But
probably
you'd be
won't,
the first, you think?
No.
Well, you're young enough.
I don't think we'll have the prime minister position.
Rebecca Feiner, what would be your first impression of this?
Well, this is very interesting portrait. Again, it's got a contemporary feel. The shirt that he's wearing is a stripy shirt, which kind of is very fashionable in the sort of late 1980s, that kind of look.
Have you seen, it's a bomber.
Yes, I understand that. But what's interesting for me, as an art correspondent, is that how he's juxtaposed these two things. So you could say there's some machinery of violence here, there's a bomber, but he's chosen to have himself framed with nature, with leaves, and also this blue sky in the background, kind of representing, for almost every culture, kind of hope. So there's very interesting double messages, probably more than double messages going on in this portrait.
I'll tell you what, it was our Prime Minister, Danish Prime Minister, and he had Denmark into the Afghan war, the Iraqi war, and having a bomber on his portrait, that means I stand with my decision or what?
Yes, I presume that, I don't know, I presume they have a dialogue and they work with kind of parliamentary accepted list of painters and artists, because otherwise it could be a sculptural response to someone. And he said specifically what signatures, looking at this, what signatures he wants in his portrait, what he sees as significant about his time. So he's presenting himself as like, you know, a can-do person. He's almost dressed very much like a businessman, but we've got this representation of mountains in the background and then some machinery of war, which he obviously feels very proud of, because he looks very content. He's got a kind of Mona Lisa smile there. He's going for a half smile, so he's content with his decision making.
Would it be surprising for you if I tell you the painter is a very well-known left radical artist?
I guess it's how much money they were offering.
Well, it's probably the most symbolic image here in Parliament because it has for example, the NATO star up in the sky. He was NATO General Secretary, so that makes sense. And there's these propels on the wings, which actually is the logo for my party, because it was the party that made his government possible.
And actually, it's not a bomber; it's for transportation of soldiers.
Yes, but it is a military plane, and of course, it has to do with the desert wars.
So at this time, your party was holding the balance of power, so that he could make these decisions.
Yes, exactly.
Well, if you should have a symbol in your painting portrait, what would that be?
Oh, I don't know.
A Muhammad drawing, maybe?
No, probably not. But I'd have to think about it. I don't know.
This one is his Jens Otto Krag. Can you tell me what time?
Well, this is very interesting. I'm not a time detective, I'm the art detective. But what I will say about this, in contrast to all the other images, he's chosen not to have himself depicted in a sort of politician costume of the business suit. He's chosen this very kind of casual, soft garb. The background is fairly non-defined, although it has the sea in the sky. Obviously, Denmark, you have like a massive coastline, despite being quite a small country in geographical terms. So I'm very intrigued by this. Even his hair is kind of casual in how he's presenting himself. And I guess we can find out from our Member of Parliament whether the casualness of how he's chosen to be depicted was reflected in some of his policies, perhaps towards culture or people or welfare.
He was a very popular Prime Minister, but
Social Democrat.
Yes, but he was a Social Democrat, but he was not that casual in his way of dressing, for example, not in Parliament at least.
And in his politics, was he? Did he have liberal attitudes towards, you know, as we would say, kind of laissez-faire?
He'd probably be considered some kind of the Danish JF Kennedy or something like that. He was a very popular guy.
Same time as Kennedy.
Yes.
I tell you, this is very interesting because this was our Prime Minister, and he was mano-depressive.
Okay.
But does the painting tell you something about his mental state?
Well, this is very interesting because this painting, or the painter has chosen to depict definitely, almost it's a psychological portrait, and it has a kind of nod to the English painter, born in Dublin, the painter Francis Bacon, and we saw some of his portraits in the Museum of Louisiana, the heavy brushwork, kind of impasto, so there's almost a physicality, so it's not just like a depiction of, a reality depiction of the person, but almost inside his psychological state is using very, very dark colours. So even if I hadn't been told that, I would be very intrigued that he chooses to have this as his portrait on show to the public. This is very interesting because he looks like a commuter on the way to work. You would say commuter in Danish?
Yes. It's actually a beautiful painting.
Yeah, it's very kind of, and I like the idea, well, like me, he's carrying his jacket, he hasn't given it to his assistant or servant. Yeah. So we met this Prime Minister earlier, okay?
Very flexible.
Okay. This one?
Yes.
No, it's Paul Hartling.
Oh, Paul Hartling, yes, of course. Paul Hartling.
Well corrected.
But he was very flexible during the Cold War.
Yeah.
And this one, I'm intrigued by this one because it's got a touch of kind of almost Soviet realism about it, and the fact that he's chosen to do himself mid-speech in a delivery with his hand in this gesture, which now we would see as quite old-fashioned when we see documentary footage of politicians speaking there. Quite often we would call this a lectern.
But that's very much
speaker's box. So can you tell me a bit about him?
It's very much as he saw himself.
Yeah, he was a social democrat.
Okay.
He was a very red Prime Minister.
Okay,
Yeah.
so then I picked up on this kind of slight hint of the Soviet realism.
I think you did.
I think
Can
he might.
I ask what our Member of Parliament, can I ask him what this, can you translate?
No, because it's just...
this one probably says something about
social democracy.
It's a social democracy.
But we don't know because it's not the whole sentence.
Well, that's very interesting that it's being...
But he was maybe the most popular.
It says Denmark for the people.
So this, I'm just going to give my artistic and emotional response to this one, and you can tell me how far away I am from this. He comes across as someone who was like a businessman, maybe a slightly bureaucratic approach to politics. Would that be correct?
Well, no, he was not that bureaucratic, but he is of course a liberal or conservative
He's a lawyer.
Prime Minister, and as you can see, it's during the 80s. So the Conservative Party at this point was very inspired by America, and of course
American economics.
Yes, American Thatcher and Reagan and so on. That's Paul Nero.
Another social democrat.
And again, I think it's really interesting the legacy that politicians want to leave, because again, he's got this slightly casual pose. He's got the two tubes of paint in here. He's leaning forward, almost as if he's in the psychiatrist's chair. He's leaning forward to tell us something. It's quite personal. He's chosen a very informal pose with how his hands are. And this chair is a very modest piece of furniture. I mean, we're here in the beautiful Parliament. I don't know if you can see all the chandeliers. It's a very grand building. So he's chosen to project himself in this decidedly modest way. So I'm really intrigued of the consciousness of all these politicians. They're making really active choices about their legacy, how they want to be remembered. So was he this sort of person, or he?
He was a social democrat.
Yes? Okay.
I don't particularly like him, but he was mildly popular.
There's something very lovely about it, the way he's looking off into the middle distance. He looks beautiful. He looks, we'd say, professorial. He looks academic. He looks as if you disagreed with him. He would listen to what you had to say.
That's one of my favorites as well.
And I think it's a really, really, even though it's quite traditional, it's a really, really beautiful portrait, not just in technically how it's been executed by the artist, but also the portrayal of this man. I feel I know something of his personality.
He was the first social democratic Prime Minister. When was it?
Where was it?
It's in the 30s,
yes,
in 1930s.
It's around the 30s,
Okay.
He was Prime Minister during the Nazi occupation of our country.
Okay, so the late 90s.
So he's not an intellectual. He didn't have any skills or education at all.
No, but
Well, I think you can be an intellectual without having to go. Otherwise, we would dismiss Socrates. So I think that's a very modern and limited 20th, 21st century, because most of our great philosophers would be dismissed.
What is your major subject? You're the spokesperson for your party on cultural matters.
Culture.
What is your main concern right now?
Of course, we want a culture policy that's more about our national identity and history and so on, while other parties want a culture policy that's more politically induced somehow and sells some more modern values to the people. And,
what will you, as a first thing, bring to the voting in the Parliament after the summer holidays?
Oh, I don't know. We have not decided on that yet, but we have some things in work. Yeah.
So you keep your gunpowder dry?
Yes, for now.